Hi, it's Mr. G here, and today we're going to be going through 6.1 consumption choices. And so ultimately, we're trying to determine how do households make decisions on what to buy. And so when we're looking at this, how do households make decisions what to buy? Obviously, we look back to what we've learned so far. So if can they afford something? And you remember the whole idea of demand. It's like you have to be able to afford it. You have to be willing to spend it. And as well, basically, you have to actually want the item. And so we look at the first line, budget constraint line, everything else, gives all the combinations that are possible, can show whether we can afford it. But the second component is there has to be some satisfaction from it. What does satisfaction mean? Like you have to get something out of it, some kind of value out of it. You're not going to go out and buy something you don't want. If you're buying something, you buy food, it's because you're hungry and you think something will taste good. You're not going to buy something that's like, oh, I hate how that tastes, but I'm going to go buy it. And then just throw it away because I'm not even going to bother eating it. We look at things that give us satisfaction or value, and we make decisions on what we're going to spend it on. So that is how a household makes a decision on what to buy. Can they afford it? Is there satisfaction? So if we look at the budget constraint line, that gives us all the combinations that are possible. However, we notice that there's on a budget constraint all these different points along the line. However, which point are they going to choose? Okay, because sometimes they give examples like 10 cookies, and they could have 10 cookies and 0 coffees, or 5 coffees and 0 cookies. Well, people are like, well, you wouldn't want to eat 10 cookies. Who wants to eat 10 cookies? And so what we do is we actually look at satisfaction to determine what actual point we're actually going to choose. Okay, so satisfaction is measured in utils, and people are like, what's utils? Utils is a unit to measure satisfaction, and we'll go through the numbers a little bit more, but you just have to remember when we're talking about utils, we're talking about a number for measuring satisfaction. Okay, so ultimately, we're looking for the greatest utility. What does that mean? Greatest satisfaction. We're looking for things that gives us the most enjoyment in the end, and we're going to make choices based upon that. So we have what's called MU, marginal utility, which is the change in total utility divided by the change in quantity. Okay, so we're looking at marginal utility. Marginal being extra. How much extra utility are we getting? And by looking at the change in the total utility divided by the quantity of units, okay? Or you can look at, for getting one additional, exactly how much extra utility are we going to get. So that's another way you can kind of look at it. And we know that diminishing marginal utility, that utility decreases with each unit added. So if we look at an example that we have here, and we'll look at this example. Okay, we have bagels and we have coffee, and we can notice with marginal utility that essentially as we are going down, we are receiving less and less utility. First of all, people are like, well, how did you come up with these numbers? Okay, how do you know that you're going to get a marginal utility of 20 for a $2 bagel? And these are numbers that you essentially make up. However, all of us would probably, if I was to tell you to come up with the amount of utility that a bagel would give you and a coffee would give you, different people would derive different numbers. And it doesn't really matter the number as much as how it compares to something else. So if I really loved coffee more than bagels, I shouldn't be giving coffee a marginal utility of 15 and bagels a marginal utility of 20, because essentially, why would I, if I like coffee more, why would I give it less satisfaction in terms of bagels? So often it's about in how it compares, okay? So when you're putting in your numbers, it's a matter of looking at how they compare to the other item. Okay, and so that's really where utility comes from. But of course, if you were to do this, your numbers would be different. But then again, your choices would be different. What you prefer, you might hate coffee, and right away off the bat, it'd be a negative utility. I'm never going to drink that, but I love bagels. And so your choices are just going to be just to buy bagels. But that's you, because you wouldn't want to have coffee. because you don't like coffee. So ultimately, for each one of us, these numbers can be different. But the idea is to understand how we make choices. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what we've already covered, which essentially is the whole idea of a budget graph. Okay? Budget constraint. So this is what you see with the graph right here. This is a budget constraint. We have a budget of $10. We covered this. We can buy, 5 bagels and 0 coffees, or 10 coffees and 0 bagels. You can see our opportunities set below. Notice what I did with this here, though. I added up the total utility. So what I did was for 5 bagels and 0 coffees, which is one of the points on our budget constraint, I came up with the number 61. If we look over here, okay, 5 bagels brings us to a point that basically is right here. So 5 bagels brings us to 61 right there. And then, of course, 0 coffees. And so we know right away that our total utility is 61. For the next one, you can see 56 plus 26. Well, that's for 4 bagels is 56. And then 26 is for 2 coffees. Right over there. And so you can see where those where the numbers are, and we're just adding them up. So for all the combinations, we're looking at the marginal utility, or the total utility, I should say, for that total number. Okay. So how much utility is 4 bagels or 5 bagels going to give us? And then we put it in. And we do that for all the combinations. And we notice that a combination of 3 bagels and 4 coffees, when we do this, we come up with a total satisfaction of 87, which is the highest number here. That is what we would choose. Given these numbers that we're given, the choice we would be for our budget would be 3 bagels, 4 coffees. That's what we can afford, and that would give us the most satisfaction. Okay? This is the first method of solving how you can do it. We're going to go through some different methods. This is the first one. So the first method, what do? Well, you take your opportunity set from your budget constraint. You determine the total amount of utility for each of the numbers. So total utility for 5 bagels, well, that's 61, and 0 coffees, well, that's 0. Total utility for 4 bagels is 56. Total utility for 2 coffees is 26. You add them together, 82. And you keep going through and you do that, and then you take the one with the highest number. So this is the first method to solve it. Okay, so this one works. You just have to go through, figure everything out. So if you want to solve it this way, you can. But we're going to be looking at another method. So we have this same example. Okay, so this is the same example. And you can see that with method 2, which is what we're doing right now, the final choice of 3 bagels and 4 coffees also comes up. All right, so let's go through and figure out how we did this. So what we're doing is we have this mu divided by p. What does that mean? Well, if you think about it, like buying a sports car is going to give you a huge amount of satisfaction. Okay, so if you were to go out and buy a sports car, it'd give you a huge amount of satisfaction. However, if you get a bottle of water, you might be like, okay, it's great, I'm a little thirsty, but it's not like, wow, that's great satisfaction. But if you were to divide the total satisfaction received from the sports car divided by the price, and then you were to take the total satisfaction received from the water bottle divided by the price, you can see that for the price per dollar spent, you might actually get more satisfaction out of a bottle of water than you do a sports car. And so when we look at things, we have to look at divided by price. So this is exactly what we're doing. So when we're looking at a bagel, if you think about what is a bagel, well, that's equal to 2 coffees, because a coffee is $1, or I can get 1 bagel. Okay, so I can't compare the total or the utility I receive from just a bagel compared to 1 coffee, because essentially they're different prices. I'd have to almost compare, 1 bagel against 2 coffees. And so what we do is we divide things by price. So if you notice mu divided by p, I have 20 divided by 2, which is the price. I come up with 10. Then I have 16 divided by 2, come up with 8. And 12 divided by 2, 6. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. etc., all the way through. And I come up with this MU divided by price. And I do the same thing on the other side. But of course, with a $1 price, the number stays the same. So that's the reason the MU divided by price for coffee is the same as the marginal utility, because we're taking marginal utility divided by 1, which of course is the same number. So what ultimately is going to be our choice? Well, if we look at it, now we can compare. So I'm going to look, and I'm going to take this one first, the 15. So the 15 MU divided by price is the highest number. So my first choice is going to be 1 coffee. That gives me the most bang for the buck on that one. My next choice, choice number 2, is going to be 11, because that's the next higher number. So far I've bought 2 coffees. That's $2 worth. Okay? And remember, our budget is $10 in this particular case. So $10 right there, you can see. And so our next choice, well, we look at the next highest number. The next highest number is actually 10. So that's going to be what our next item is going to be. What's the next highest number? So far we have 2 coffees and 1 bagel. Well, the next highest number is 9. So we're going to go with that. So now we have 3 coffees, $3, plus a bagel, so we're at $5. We used up half of our budget. Well, what's going to be next? Well, then we're going to go for bagels. We're going to have this and this. Okay, so 8 and 6. And so we have a total now of, what is it, $6 there. And we have basically $3, so we're at $9 right now. And so our last choice is going to be this. And you can see that they're both 4. So why do we choose coffee? Well, we can afford it within our budget. We were at $9. We can only afford the $1 to bring us to our budget of 10. So our final choice would be 3 bagels and 4 coffees. This is exactly what we came up with method 1. If we go back, we came up with that choice of 3 bagels and 4 coffees. So just doing MU divided by price and going back and forth and choosing the highest number is another way that you can essentially solve and figure out what is the point that's going to give us the most satisfaction. Another one to look at is MU. We look at the formula, MU, marginal utility of 1 divided by price, equals marginal utility of 2 divided by the price. Okay, so we see here that 10 divided by 2 is equal to 5 divided by 1. Okay, so how do I come up with that? Well, I took the 10 divided by 2, and that's coming up from here. Marginal utility for bagels of 10 divided by 2, okay, is equal to 5 divided by 1. So I took everything and I solved for the 5. So 5 I put in an x for, and I basically solved for that. And so really it's telling us at what point we would start being more indifferent between them. So if we look at it, okay, this here is a graph and of basically the numbers above. So if you look at it, what would we do in this particular case? Well, we would keep deciding. We would take things all along here. Okay, so if we were deciding what to buy, we would keep going and going and going and going until we got closer down to that point there. Okay, so we basically would keep buying, in this particular case, up until this point. And you remember that held true. Up above here, what did we do? Well, we bought a lot more coffee first because it gave us the more bang for our buck, okay? And so we'd buy all that red area first. At this point right here, you can see that essentially they start being the same MU divided by price. And so we would go, in this particular case, back and forth and back and forth, and we would keep buying each of them back and forth, and we'd keep going down that way. All right, but some people would be like, well, you got a 5, and that definitely looks like a 4. It actually even looks like less than 4. Okay, and so that should be around a 4, but if you're looking at it, well, 5 is way over here. How does that work with the number? What it is we didn't have that specific point on our graph. Of course, when we calculate numerically, the line would have continued on and would have probably been closer to 5. And so that's where this method is a little bit more tricky with it because of all the points, everything else. In this particular case, we would look at the closest one to 5, which would be the MU divided by price, which would be 4. And you can see that's what we exactly ended up with. We ended up with 4 coffees. And so looking at that, we could realize that, with MU divided by price, that can also help us as well to determine which way to do it. But a lot of students usually prefer the other two methods for figuring things out. So one of the other ones, but these are different ways and different methods that you can use to determine what point, what satisfaction would give, or which combination would give you the most satisfaction. All right, so that is it for 6.1 consumption choices. Mr. G, and bye for now.